All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Comic Book Hit List Show. This is Steve and Ty. Today, we're going to be going through our 5 favorite DC solo character books.
DC Comics, baby.
Oh, your boy flexing.
That's right.
All right, I'll kick things off.
Okay.
So, my first pick, Green Arrow by filmmaker extraordinaire Kevin Smith and the team of Phil Hester and Andy Park on art. This was sort of the reinvigoration of Green Arrow.
Yeah, like completely.
This brought him back. He was, I think, somewhat popular in the 80s, but this came out in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
And I'm specifically referring to the first storyline where they essentially bring him back from the dead.
Right. This is kind of like the Mike Grell Green Arrow of our age.
Yeah, Mike Grell was the main Green Arrow writer in the 80s with the first or second series. And it definitely infused Kevin Smith's sort of quirky dialogue, knack for his kind of humor, and Phil Hester and Andy Park's kind of a little bit more of a cartoony style, which I think fit. I think it fit because it was supposed to be a little bit more on the whimsical side. It definitely was serious in tone, but the overall there was humor in there that they wanted to infuse, that it made sense to have that sort of cartoony style.
And when he needed to be Green Arrow serious, it still the style still worked.
Right, exactly.
Because Green Arrow in this run becomes mayor, this is picked up right in the TV series. I think this was a perfect intro of how Green Arrow could become a TV series. And, the Green Arrow series, as it is, it's very long running. I think it's on his last season, or already has his last season. Perfect.
I agree. I think they lifted a lot, or they took a lot of inspiration from specifically this series. Some of it from Grell's series too, and there was obviously, Brad Meltzer, Judd Winnick after Kevin Smith, and then Andy Diggle was after that as well.
Right.
Character on the show, so they definitely took a lot from the comics. But I think particularly this particular series, starting with Kevin Smith's initial 6-issue run.
I'm with you, man. I'm going to jump right in because this is a book I have rant and raved about. And again, I talked about this in the last episode where I talked about if someone is able, writer, and I mention writer all the time, but I'm going to give love to artists because artists are great as well. If I find a writer, usually writer or writer artist that can lead me somewhere, I am very happy because that means that they've opened up a whole new existence for me. I'm going to go with Jeff Johns, James Robinson, Rags Morales, Hawkman. In no short order did this team create a blazing hot story. I put it right up there at the top because, again, I've always been a Hawkman fan. There isn't a whole lot of past Hawkman stories that are in my collection. I went back and bought some of those things. This Hawkman story came out right after a great reimagining of Hawkman in JSA, where Jeff Johns helped revitalize, correct his history, put things in order, kind of bring things into a focused area, and then kick this thing off. This book didn't even stop when Jeff Johns and Rags Morales left. When Jimmy Palmiotti, Justin Gray, and Joe Bennett picked it up, it kept going with just as much intensity as when it first started off. And I, Jeff Johns, and I have another Jeff Johns on my list, but I'm not going to spoil it yet. But he's a writer who has figured out a way to get people to pay attention. His whole connection with the director, Richard Donner, and the internship, and then coming to DC, and then being trained by James Robinson and David S. Goyer. The way they trained this guy and helped him create his voice in comics, it shows in his writing. So if you don't have Hawkman in your collection, go out and pick it up. Now, I know my Facebook Hawkman group, I know we talk about this run all the time because this is a powerful run. Beautiful covers, very, very well-written story by Jeff Johns and James Robinson. And I'm trying to think another time where I've seen Mark Morales, and it was the next time after I saw him do from this story was Identity Crisis. This was kind of my first image of the type of art that he does. And from each panel, from beginning to end, he tore it up. He completely tore it up. So Hawkman, book one, it's even an omnibus edition. Grab those bad boys. That is a great read.
I second Jeff Johns. He's on my list too. Not Hawkman, but he's on my list.
All right.
Jumping into my number 2, I'm gonna go with Superman Red Son.
Okay.
Mark Miller, Dave Johnson, Killian Plunkett. This book, another reimagining Elseworlds title, but man, do they really make you feel like it could be, I don't know how to describe it. Like
it could be continuity. It could be what we're reading.
Yeah, but in a way that it's not so far-fetched, but it's far-fetched. The reason why I say that is because we all know Superman's like apple pie,
right.
Raised in Kansas, goes to Metropolis, but in Red Son, he lands in the USSR, which you think the exact opposite, but there's a lot of parallels. And Mark Miller, who is usually known for sort of the blockbuster, big stories, big things happening. This to me was one of the more nuanced, very nuanced in how he wrote the DC characters that you know and love, but in a twisted way.
Right.
And I'm not just talking about Superman working with the Russians and living in the USSR. And then you've got Dave Johnson's artwork, which before this, honestly, I wasn't super familiar with his art, but it really flows into what the story he's trying to convey. Sort of that classic old-timey look.
Yeah.
But again, sort of turning things on its head, specifically with some of the characters, reimagining them. But this is one of the stories that I recommend to new readers that don't know where to start, specifically because sort of the origin and the mythology of Superman.
Right.
But this gives a new take, but will feel very, very familiar.
That was a good book, and isn't it now even an animation?
You're exactly right. I want to say within the last year, they did release or maybe they're planning on release it. Let us know, guys, in the comments if we're way off the mark there.
Right.
10 years ago.
Yeah, man. And to all you guys out there listening, don't forget to like, share, subscribe down below. Leave those great comments. And again, the more you give us input, the more we will listen to your input and bring those ideas and things to the show. I have a very good one. And so for me, once we thought about this idea, like a bunch of stuff came to me. Well, nothing came to me in the beginning. And then I pulled up an image of just a bunch of DC characters. And then as I watched the image, everything started pouring in. So there is actually a great deal of stories that I've purchased and picked up from DC. I'm a very big DC fan. I think DC over anything else. Probably, I love my Image, but DC and Image are probably right there neck and neck. I'm going to go with the same writer, Jeff Johns. So I have Jeff Johns' Flash. It's called Rogue War. And it goes from issue 207 and on. It's the latter part of that run, that volume before it ends. It has the Michael Turner covers, which are beautiful.
I just want you close.
But I am partial to the Howard Porter art, and I'm partial to that because of Grant Morrison, Howard Porter's Justice League run. I'm not a Flash fan, not a lot of Flash in my collection. I can tell you the Flash stories that are there, the Grant Morrison, Mark Miller Flash run. There's a Mark Waid Flash run. There's this one. There's a few others, but this Flash run for me, Rogue War, gave me a lot of insight into just how deep these rogues are. Like, I watched the old Flash TV series, the current Flash TV series. So I had a good understanding of who the Flash is. I just didn't think he was that powerful or attention-getting of a character. But he truly is. This series and a few of the series, this run really shows that he is a powerhouse in and of himself. As this came out and other creators began to build on what Jeff Johns did, but also build on just how he's very relevant in science, how he's relevant in being a detective and forensics. And they just made Flash become this character that a lot of people now want to pay attention to. And I think more people are paying attention to Flash than ever before. So for me, this run, Rogue Wars, Jeff Johns, and it actually started off with Scott Collins and then Howard Porter. What can I say? It's not one of my top stories, but it's one that's memorable. It's one that when I talk to people, I go, yeah, you know what? If you like the Flash TV series, you got to get this series, because this will give you a more in-depth and how emotionally tied he is with these rogues and what these rogues are really thinking. Again, it's one of those things that it was just a memorable run. And I think Jeff Johns and Howard Porter did such a good job that it's one of those things that sticks out to me. Still didn't make me a major Flash, a lover of Flash, but definitely made me want to get each and every one of these issues.
I have a hard time disagreeing with that, because that was, I'm right up there with you.
There you go. Yeah.
I'm back a few stories though with Scott Collins and Jeff Johns. I think this was the last Jeff Johns, Scott Collins collaboration of Flash. It's Blitz.
Yeah,
that's the name of the story. And the original issues are 192 to 200.
Yeah, and people weren't really feeling Scott Collins' art on that. I
disagree.
Highly detailed.
I disagree, because he did the first. I think he did the first at least 4 story arcs. To me, they were fire.
Yeah.
To me, they were more indicative of what the story in Jeff Johns, and really for Flash, because of the way he drew the Speed Force, and then like how kinetic he was.
Yeah,
I thought it might be a better representation.
Yeah, I agree.
I think Howard Porter, to your point, he's obviously a great artist, and he was coming off a really strong JLA run with Grant Morrison. But I think for my money, I think Scott Collins, he's up there as one of the top Flash artists. And again, back to your point about Jeff Johns, no one, putting a lot of focus on the Rogues. This to me is his magnum opus of Rogue of Rogues.
Yeah.
Because he created this character, the main villain in this arc, Zoom, much different than in this TV series, I might add. This character is much deeper. He is probably one of my favorite villains. Insofar as his motivations, why he's a villain.
Right.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
Very crazy, but it makes sense.
And that actually continues on in the Brett Booth run. They dealt with Zoom again. It even goes deeper in that. So, and I did read a little bit of that.
He's got sort of the prototypical tragedy as far as his backstory goes, and then he's really powerful. But then you put that together with his motivation. I mean, Jeff Johns really set up Zoom to be Flash's his arch nemesis.
My next one, and I think everybody will, again, I read a lot of Batman stories. Instead of hot seat this time at the end, I think we're going to do some honorable mentions. So that'll give me a little bit more time later to talk about more Batman stories. But the first story I want to talk about is Batman Hush. And I think everybody who heard me say Batman figured I was going to say Batman Hush. This story was everything I think every Batman lover and every person who hates on Batman could have dreamed of. Batman has no powers. He is just a man, and he embodies the human spirit, and he embodies, if you push yourself, if you train yourself, you can be this ultimate warrior, and you can actually do some good with being that character. And I think that's what this actually did. I think Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee created a story that was multifaceted, that brought in the rogues like never before. I think Batman has, like Flash, has a lot of rogues, but the rogues in this particular story, they amped it up a notch. The history of Batman, the tension between Batman and Catwoman, the love between Batman and Catwoman, the tension between Batman and his wards, and that means all of them. I could not have imagined, and Jeff Loeb being one of my top 5 writers in the business, I could not imagine what was coming. But each individual issue brought something. And this is one of the penultimate stories in my collection. I think probably the last 10, 15 years. I mean, I couldn't think of another. I can think of a Batman story that came close to it, but I can't think of another Batman story that was this in-depth, this good. It drew in every single rogue. It drew in every single collector. I haven't met one person that said, I don't really like that story. People I meet at cons, they all enjoy Batman Hush. I have it in single issues, sometimes double and triplicates. I have it in the absolute edition. I have it in the hardback edition. It did a lot for me. I'm a big DC fan. Love certain Batman stories. This was right up there. This was up there with the best of them. Batman Year One, really good. This kind of, for me, overtakes that all by itself.
I feel you on the Batman. I'm gonna switch it up a little bit. I'm sticking with Batman, but I'm going with Batman Jeff Loeb, but the Dark Victory. I think this is going to be I think it's going to be a little bit of surprise to a lot of the viewers. I think a lot of them are going to agree with you about Hush. I mean, you know, Jim Lee's art is second to none. He's a master. But Tim Sale, Jeff Loeb,
yeah,
I mean they're the real dynamic duo. So this is a continuation of the Long Halloween series, and I think I think a lot of people are also going to say, "Well, Steve, isn't the Long Halloween that's like number one? That's the story, and this is part two. This is the sequel."
Right.
To me, this is actually better, similar to what Jeff Loeb did with Hush. He injected more villains. He added Robin, and you know, I think the Long Halloween was also very good, much more of a gangster feel. Dark Victory, it was also a mystery, but it also had a lot more of that feel of now you're in Batman's Gotham City.
Yeah.
With his rogues, almost like a year's, you know, 3, 4, 5.
Right.
And Tim Sale, you know, he's a master with the shadows, with the paintbrush and the inking. To me, everything came together in this story. So yeah, so this is one I think you got to pick up, regardless of reading Long Halloween. I think you should pick that up too. But to me, between those two, this would be my top.
Would you say that the stories that we're talking about can be read self-contained and give people a lot of history about the character, even if they didn't read any of the other issues, circling it or like after it or before it?
Absolutely, I think so. You know, a lot of them exist in some sort of continuity, but that doesn't mean the story doesn't make sense without it. That besides the fact that it's self-contained, it is a complete story.
I'm going to go with a story that I just happened to stumble upon, and I really do mean I stumbled upon it. I'm actually trying to figure out when I picked these issues up and why even. I want to say I picked them up because I was either going to meet the writer or the artist, and I'm more leaning towards I was going to meet the artist, and I didn't have anything from the sign, and I think I picked these books up to get him to sign because I figured, let me find something that's a little bit interesting that's off the beaten path that I might not have read. And this is one of those times where I went with my gut, and man, was it a real treat to go with my gut on this one. I read Rot World, and I have to tell you, it changed everything. I picked this up, I think in part because of the artist, but Scott Snyder was writing, I think, Batman at the time. And I think I was going to see him at one point and then see Yannick at a different point. So I figured I could kind of get both of them. So I picked up probably 8 to 10 of these books, and it happened to be the Rot World story arc, which is the Red Kingdom and the Green Kingdom. And I have to tell you, I was so pleasantly surprised at how good and how powerful Swamp Thing really is, that it changed my idea of Swamp Thing. It changed my idea completely of who he was and how powerful he was, how he's connected to the earth, how he connects to the entire, the green of the earth, and how it's its own universe within the planet, right? So if you think of the biosphere, that's its own little cosmic entity, or, you know, earthbound entity that can function and change the rest of the world, which I thought was pretty interesting. So again, this is not one of my top super best stories, but it ended up being a really good, well-written story that gave me a lot of information about something I knew nothing about. I didn't know literally anything about Swamp Thing other than when he probably crossed over into some Justice League book. So for me, this was completely off the beaten path and pleasantly surprised at the depth of the story. I like the fact how it actually showed how him and Poison Ivy are connected to this thing. It brought in Animal Man, it brought in Dead Man. I just did not think that these characters morphing together would create such a good story, but also create a good piece of DC history that can be, that for me can be expanded upon. So I can see, you know, I always envision, like, if I were to write a story, I could totally envision an entire story around this group of characters taking over the planet. Rot World, Swamp Thing's Rot World, the Red Kingdom versus the Green Kingdom, is one I would honestly tell you to go out because it will be a good read. It is a really good comic book story. I don't know how it would translate over into TV or movie, but I can tell you this is a thoroughly good comic book story. I mean, it has all the parts of adventure, superpowers, expanding of superpowers, you know, a reason to be fighting. It was good. It was good, hand down. A pleasant surprise by picking up something on a whim.
I think we've all done that. We've all stumbled upon a diamond in the rough. Yeah, good pick. Rounding off my last pick for favorite 5 for DC solo characters. Going back to the man Jeff Johns, Green Lantern.
Yeah.
Rebirth. Similar to Kevin Smith's Green Arrow.
Mm-hmm.
Green Lantern was kind of in limbo. He was kind of in limbo after Hal Jordan became the Spectre, and Jeff Johns, he just, not only did he bring him back, he just expanded the Green Lantern mythology by 1,000-fold. I mean,
yeah, agreed.
Who knows how many series spun up out of it, how many new characters, how many popular characters. Rebirth was just the start, but the combo of him and Ethan Van Sciver, trying to describe his artwork, it's got this like surrealist feel to it.
Yeah,
it's got this feel where it looks kind of familiar, the way he does some of his exaggerations for the characters. Everything is just, it's just on point.
Remember the comment you made about how Scott Collins made the Flash move and his whole aura of being the Flash? I think Ethan Van Sciver did that with the Green Lantern insignia, the Green Lantern aura around Hal when he would fly. I think that was something in that series that was very powerful. I think he expanded on how you could draw the Green Lantern.
Yeah, the way he drew Green Lantern, Sinestro, all the characters.
Yeah,
it was just very unique. It had this really cool look to them. It was different, but not too different. You know, it wasn't like a complete new reimagining.
Right.
I mean, there was obviously familiarity with the characters. You know, this is Hal Jordan. You know, he was Green Lantern for years. Sinestro's been his arch villain for years, but just what he added to them, it was like he was adding to the mythos with Jeff Johns, but in the visual medium. So that's got to be up there. I mean, if you're gonna read any Green Lantern, you definitely should start there. And if you had to pick up, I think if you had to pick up just one Green Lantern book, that again, it's self-contained, but it is the start of a very lengthy run. I want to say 50, 60 issues.
I can say one of my favorite panels from that story arc was the Batman Green Lantern. when he puts on the ring and he realizes this is not as easy as I thought. I think that particular panel kind of put Batman in his place when it comes to exactly how mentally strong Hal Jordan is.
Jeff Johns, he has a way of putting on the page what people are thinking.
Yeah.
What if Batman had a Green Lantern ring? Think of how powerful he'd be. Actually, he wouldn't be that powerful.
He would not be that powerful at all. He would not.
Exactly. And I think
he's got too many things going on for him to actually create constructs that would be solid and long enough. But I also think he comes across as I'm this powerful, but he's actually afraid of failing.
And he uses fear too.
Yes.
That's different than having a lack of fear or understanding fear.
Right.
In the way that powers the ring.
Again, as I said in the beginning of the episode, I had a lot of stories that I could come up with that I felt were really, really good. But I also want to make sure I expand it. I know we have some ladies out there watching, and I always want to make sure I include them because there's a lot of beautiful ladies out there who are buying comics and collecting and talking and enjoying and cosplay. This one is for you, man. I picked up Batgirl, Cassandra Cain, Batgirl, from issue 1, I think it was. And just learning about this character and about her past, her father, and how she was just this PTSD individual who she suffered from PTSD. She suffered from being abused. She suffered from being made to be an assassin. She was abused and all of these things. And how she turned out in the end and what she became in the end it was a great drawn out story. I even have to say Jim Calafiore, I really think his black and white stuff is really good. I think once it gets colored, something kind of changes for me when I see his art. Kelly Plunkett, Scott Peterson, Damian Scott, and Campanella, they created a great story. Gotham City was beautiful. The way Cassandra wore her cape when she had her cowl on, which literally covered her entire face, they actually drew her sadness. They actually drew her anger. Her power came through. Her agility came through. The fact that she was a woman and the way she moved was different came through. And there was a part of this story when she didn't talk at all. So as she was moving through that part of her life and becoming, becoming I don't even know a better way to say it, but becoming a not as violent assassin by wearing the Batman chest plate, cape, and cowl, she changed but transcended to be someone that a lot of the readers of Batgirl really ended up enjoying. I didn't really know what to expect. I think for me, outside of Batman, the second thing I probably picked up was Nightwing. And so this was a very good change of pace. Still the Batman pantheon, still Gotham, still going through overcoming fear. I see Damian Wayne's story kind of similar to her story. But this Batgirl story, Volume 1, Silent Night, I would say for a lot of girls or women wanting to know their power, wanting to know how strong they can be, this is a good book to pick up. I think it's good for young girls to read that, young girls go through these things. Maybe not as that serious, but young girls go through these things and you can make your way out of these crazy situations with focus, becoming a stronger individual person, and just becoming a physically strong person. I mean, she is physically strong in this story arc. She doesn't hold back her strength. It's not hidden. She's really that strong. So, and powerful and agile and a great fighter. So definitely Batgirl, Cassandra Cain, Silent Night, very good story to pick up.
Good top 5. Good top.
Yeah,
good
absolutely good. Yeah. So I think instead of doing a hot seat, we're going to do some honorable mentions, because there's a lot of honorable mentions, man. And I have a few. So I'm going to kick this thing off and pass it on to Steve. Another very good honorable mention would be Superman, which would be Jeff Loeb, Ed McGuinness's run, which is from about 151 to 183, I think it is. You have everything in there from vampires. You have the Joker War. I think it was called Joker War. You have all of his rogues. You have Uncle Sam. You have the Freedom Fighters. You have social issues. So Superman, the Jeff Loeb, Ed McGuinness run, honorable mention as being a really good story to pick up. You also have, Steve mentioned Green Arrow. That was one of my honorable mentions. I really did like it. Again, Kevin Smith made me go buy something that I normally would not buy. He made me interested in a character that I normally would not be interested in. So he did it for me. Aquaman, if we go back, Eric Larson's Aquaman run, Kurt Busiek Aquaman, and of course, current Jeff John Aquaman. Those are all great stories. Steel was another one for me. I was kind of torn because I felt that Steel has this amazing history that I don't think a lot of people really get down with. But Louise Simonson and Batista started off a really, really good run. And this run talked about how he became Steel, how he designed his suit, his hammer, why he did it. It was the early stages of him becoming an engineer and then a scientist. So this is a very good, powerful run.
My honorable mentions, Ty. I'll be a little bit of a devil's advocate here, but I'll say Hush. Hush was one of my honorable mentions. Again, Jim Lee's a master, Jeff Loeb another master, but I felt like there was just so much going on in the story.
Yeah.
That, sometimes it just seemed like the flow, it was a little off.
Mm-hmm.
And then
I can agree with you on that.
Yeah. And then another honorable mention, Superman for Tomorrow, another Jim Lee with Brian Azzarello.
Yeah.
I thought it was a good story, very deep. Again, I thought the flow and then the combination of Azzarello, who's normally known for more of a gritty writing style, much more noirish, coupled with Superman. I mean, the story was also somewhat dark, but for me, it's up there. It's just not in my tops that I would always recommend. And then another honorable mention, I got to say, would be Long Halloween. Again, if you're going to pick up Dark Victory, you might as well pick up Long Halloween. But I think Dark Victory of the two, that's the one that's really stands out for me. So those are my honorable mentions, at least the ones I got right now.
I actually want to add one more honorable mention, because Western comic books used to be a big thing, and I think they kind of fell off. And I think I've told you this many times. There was a Western book that came out, Jonah Hex, which was by Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray. The Jonah Hex story, it was a good run. I have to admit, very, very good run. But maybe we'll do a whole episode on Westerns, but that definitely was an honorable mention, the Jonah Hex story. And again, I never read Jonah Hex before, but Jimmy Palmiotti, Justin Gray, they literally, if we make it, if they make it, we will come. All they did was kept making it, and I just kept coming back more. I just kept coming back issue after issue. I literally couldn't put that book down. Thank you guys for joining us. We appreciate it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe down below. Make sure you tell your friends and family and other folks, collectors, to check us out right here on the Comic Book Hit List Show.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.